All right, everybody, I think we're ready to get started. So hello and welcome to the second installment of the Mentoring Excellence webinar series presented by the National Research Mentoring Network. My name is Katie Stinson, and I'm going to go over a few announcements, introduce our speakers, and then turn it over to them for the reason you all joined today, the power of saying no. So first up, today's webinar is being recorded and will be posted to the NRMN Career Development website, as well as the NRMN YouTube channel. And I'll post both of those links in the chat right now. There will be time for a question and answer session at the end of the presentation. If you have questions throughout the webinar, please post them in the Zoom Q&A feature. The final webinar in the Mentoring Excellence webinar series is the Trials and Tribulations of Grad School, being presented by doctors, and I'm sorry, I know we just said this, and help me out.
Antenor.
Antenor, thank you. I've been pronouncing it a different way the whole time, so Antenor, thank you. Doctors Antenor Hinton Jr., Haysetta Schuler, and Melanie McReynolds. This webinar will be held on Thursday, October 29th from 12 to 1:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. And I'll post that registration link into the chat now as well. And just so you know, you will need to register in advance for that webinar. So today's webinar, The Power of Saying No, is presented by Doctors Hinton and Schuler. Dr. Hinton is a Burroughs Wellcome Fund postdoctoral enrichment scholar, E.E. Just postdoctoral fellow in life sciences, and Ford Foundation fellow at the University of Iowa in the laboratory of Dr. E. Dale Abel. Dr. Hinton has mentored 39 graduate, medical, or undergraduate students and has been awarded 3 university-wide awards and an organizational mentorship award, the Iowa Center for Research by Undergraduates Distinguishing Mentoring Award, Center for Diversity and Enrichment's Distinguished Educator Award, Diversity Catalyst Award, and an LSHAMP Excellence in Mentoring Award. Dr. Schuler provides professional and academic services to biology and chemistry majors at Winston-Salem State University. Additionally, she's an instructor for WSSU's first-year experience. With more than 15 years of experience in post-secondary education, she advocates for student success. Dr. Schuler's main area of focus is STEM internships, mentoring, and academic and professional development. Dr. Schuler serves as an advisor to the Pre-Physician Assistant Student Organization. She's the supervisor of federal work study students and a member of the National Society of Leadership and Success, the president of Citizens Budget Advisory Council of Winston-Salem, and the founder of Schuler Consultant LLC. And now, without further ado, the power of saying no. And let me get Dr. Hinton's slide set up. All right, Dr. Hinton, you're ready to go.
Yes, next slide, please. Thank you, everyone. So today we'll be having 3 main educational objectives. The main objectives will be to learn when and how to say yes, learn how to say no effectively, and learn what can impede us from saying no. And if you don't follow everything in the PowerPoint, you can actually join us by reading along on this nice publication that was published recently in June, that's in EMBO Reports, about the power of saying no. Anything that is that's covered in the PowerPoint is an addition to the EMBO reports. But in case you want to use it for your own career development, you have this as a reference to start with. So I also want to encourage everyone to be aware that this saying no seminar is so powerful because of 3 main points. 1, we're going to try to increase your research productivity. 2, we're going to try to increase your mental health, especially during the times that we're dealing with COVID and so many other things that are going on in the nation. We want to be able to say no to a lot of things. And then lastly, we want to talk about personal fulfillment, having time for yourself, dedicating yourself to something that's personal for you. And most importantly, we also want to encourage everyone that you can say yes to some things, but it's really good to say no to many things. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to caution you about what is yes. A lot of people are not sure about what is yes. Yes is a way to affirm and a response. So for example, if I asked Dr. Schuler, would she like to collaborate on a project? Dr. Schuler could say yes, or she could say no. And it just depends on what else is going on at the moment. So another way to think of yes is when we respond to someone based upon just anything that they're addressing at a point. It could be something that's attractive to us to get our attention, or it could be something that's not so attractive that we would want to say no. Next slide, please. When we're thinking about yes, we need to think about the context. Yes can be said for many different things. And yes could be a straightforward response, or it could be something that's implied, that is something that's definitive, or you're not so sure about it. For example, if you're definitive about this response, it's an absolutely. So usually when people say yes, sometimes it can be said in different ways, such as certainly or definitively or absolutely, meaning that you're more enthusiastic about it and you're eager to do these things. However, there are other times where you may get something on your plate that you don't want to say yes to so well. So next slide. Something that we always have to think about is the power to say yes to something. But we also have to realize that sometimes you need to take a step back and consider options. So sometimes when people are saying yes, they'll say, consider it done. This means this expression is, I'm a reliable person. You can count on me. When you say these things, it comes across as you're efficient, you're effective, a clear person with your life under control. However, sometimes if you look at this actual word art, it says yes in a lot of different ways. Sometimes it's not good to necessarily say yes to so many different things. And the reason I say that is because of the next slide. I say that because a lot of times you're stuck, you're trapped in the sea of yes. And this octopus is trapped inside of this pool of water, if you'll imagine with me. But because we've said yes to so many things, we don't have 2 arms. We metaphorically have 8 arms. And it could be disastrous if we don't know how to control them like the octopus. And in fact, you have to think about it. Well, maybe we can juggle with our other two arms if we think about our legs, but really, then we won't know how to walk. So really, you can only think about your right hand and your left hand and the time that you exercise to that. Maya Angelou once said, as you grow older, you will discover that you have 2 hands, one for helping yourself and another for helping others. So I want you to caution about saying yes. Success does not mean you have to say yes all the time. It's so important that we have to be particularly careful about what we say. Every opportunity that seems good can be bitter. And the reason I say that is because it could be good for later, or it could actually be bitter for later because you're not sure about the opportunity. Wrong opportunities are abundant, but often we do not filter our yeses. And lastly, successful individuals say no to things that do not align with their purpose. Dr. Schuler was instrumental in aligning my purpose when I was at Winston-Salem State. And I really want her to talk about the points of yes and why we have to be careful about when we say yes. Dr. Schuler, could you talk about that before we go to the next slide?
Sure, most definitely. Good afternoon, everyone. The problem with saying yes is that you begin to overcommit without realizing it for several reasons. One reason is because you're trying to prove a point. And mainly is you're trying to prove to yourself that you can do this, or you're trying to gain additional favor with your PI, your professor, maybe a friend, or maybe just a goal to say, I'm going to reach further than the next person. We're always trying to be greater than the next. However, we never considered the consequences of saying yes to too many opportunities. And so I have found myself in a position to help students to find that balance, because when we say yes to activities, whether it's research, whether it's attending a lot of internship opportunities, serving on a panel, serving in the community, whatever the case may be, We're so busy trying to please everyone else while we neglect our mental health. That within itself can be very dangerous, even with undergraduate students, because there's this situation, or I call it a situation instead of an ism, is we find ourselves burnt out. We're burnt out from saying yes to so many things until we can no longer think rationally, understand our options, and understand the point that we must take care of ourselves. Our mental health in whatever profession you're in is so critical because it limits your creativity. It limits your ability to seek for sound advice. It limits your ability to be able to come up with a strategic plan so you can move forward. And it also limits your ability to understand who you really are as a student, whether it's a graduate student, a postdoc, or an undergraduate student. So saying yes too much can lead to those hindrance which I believe can be avoided when you have a strategic plan and understanding how to move forward. And to move forward means sometimes you have to say no. Next slide.
When we say no, sometimes it's not only saying no for yourself, it's sometimes saying no for a team. Individuals that say no as they learn more about themselves. You have to be strategic. For example, as we're doing this seminar, I got a text message from someone on Twitter and I told them, no, I'm busy right now. You have to be able to say, not right now, I'll respond soon. But right now, my objective is to do the task in front of me. If you juggle too many things, you're not going to be effective with your delivery. You're not going to be excited about what you're doing. Your attention is going to be drawn away. And you need a constant stimulation at your new job. Sometimes when you're doing that, you think that, man, I have to prove myself. Or, oh, man, I got to do this in lab because I think it's the best situation. Or I have to do this. Sometimes it's actually good to just calm down, focus on what's the task at hand, and make a list. It's okay to write down your ideas in a book and come back to them a little bit later. It's okay to say, okay, let me meditate on this. What is powerful about saying no? Is it something that I need to do right now? Or maybe I need to observe first and then say yes later, because every opportunity is not the best opportunity for you. We all have to remember that octopus metaphor is us a lot of the times. We get so many yeses, thinking that they're the right opportunity, and sometimes is not the right opportunity. I'll give you an example. As I was doing faculty searches, I felt that the school that I'm going to was the right opportunity, because sometimes when I asked for something, they would say, well, why is it that you need this? Or why is it that you want this? Or what is, the lay of the land here at Iowa? What's different? How can we support you? So they were asking questions and observations, not giving me what I wanted right away. They were understanding what they were worth. I was understanding what I was worth. And it was a negotiation, going back and forth. And that's what it's like between yes and no. It's a negotiation. Next slide. Mm-hmm. This negotiation can be visited again at the Power of Saying No in the EMBO Reports Journal. And the reason we say that is because of these questions. So this time we're not just talking about mental health, research productivity, and the personal fulfillment, but these particular questions that we have to start thinking about and conceptualizing in our own minds. Will the opportunity, when I say yes, contribute to my career development or my long-term goals, what I'm trying to do? Then sometimes we need to ask, can I recommend a colleague for this opportunity? Because maybe he or she or they are more fitted for this than I am. And then also, what will the time commitment be? And can I dedicate time to this effort? And if you're doing this as a follow-up question, is it something that you can devote 100% of your effort to? Or are you going to have to divide it between what you're doing now and others? Mm-hmm. And lastly, what will be expected of me? And can I meet those expectations? And sometimes we even think when we take on more things, we're covering up the imposter syndrome or the unconscious bias that lies deeper and behind. So we have to be aware of those things. Next slide, please. Now, this is my favorite slide. we are given a seminar, but we're also being interviewed by other people every day. And so I decided to take a nice little quote from Jim Rohn. And what I find so fascinating is one of the things he said is so powerful. Learn how to say no. Don't let your mouth overload your back. You know the other version. We can't say that because we're being recorded. But you don't want to write a check that your back can't cash, meaning that you have to do a lot of extra work. So what we decided to do for this seminar, we decided to be a little bit more interactive. So it's just us, but we did interview a couple people, we recorded them, and we got some direct quotes that we're going to talk about, because getting a variety of answers from people allows for us to have a better contextual concept of why the paper of power saying no is so powerful. So during this, we interviewed a variety of backgrounds to listen to why they say yes too much. So next slide. So Dr. Schuler and I interviewed Dr. Zerv Vu, who's at the University of California, San Francisco. And as you can see, she's in the laboratory studying some developmental process, as she normally does, and she's exceptional at it. And in fact, she's actually on the next paper that we'll be talking about next time about the trials and tribulations of graduate school. And we interviewed her for that as well. But for today, she's talking about how and why she says yes too much and why she thinks it's the wrong thing. So when we were talking to her, we asked her, what do you think? So the responses in yellow are hers. The responses in blue are ours, the solutions of how to fix these things. So, feeling of being used. When you're a postdoc, you want to be used. You want to show that you're responsible. You want to show that you can get a good letter of recommendation because you need it for the next step. But sometimes you have to weigh the cost versus the benefit, or I like to say the risk versus the reward. So we often think that cost is better, but sometimes it's not. And also, I will let Dr. Schuler talk about the solutions, and I'm just going to introduce the next point. The next point is deciding what to say. Sometimes saying too many yeses can get us distracted. Remove our boundaries because we already set some goals for ourselves personally, and now we're doing too much at work. So we have to be aware of what's right and what's wrong for ourselves, not what's right and wrong for others, but what we can do to make ourselves feel valued outside of work so that we don't feel the need to be used while we're at work. And that is the key to having the power of saying no. Dr. Schuler, would you talk about the cost versus benefit and deciding what to say?
Sure. And in Zer's case, as we have noted, as human beings, we all know when we're in our healthy mental state, all we need to do is when there is a request or a proposal put before us, don't be in such a hurry to say, okay, yes. Let the individual know, as Dr. Hinton has said, let me think about that. That's a great opportunity, but I really want to give it some thought. And before I move any further, I would like to say, if the individual response to you is, I need an answer right now, then your response should be, I am so sorry, but I cannot give you a direct yes or no without reviewing the opportunity.
Exactly.
If the person still says, well, I must move on, then you thank the individual and say, I thank you for considering me, and I hope that we can work together in the future. And so let's move on from that. So if you do have time to consider the opportunity, get to your quiet place and ask yourself, and be true to yourself, does this disturb my peace? When you find out that I'm not sure, sometimes it does, maybe it won't, don't know, that's automatic no. If you find out that it is something that is good for your benefit, maybe as Dr. Hinton has said, maybe I can get a good letter recommendation. Maybe this would open up another door for me in such area. And even with that, go to your mentor or someone you trust that has your best interest in mind, who could look at that opportunity and give you an honest answer and say, you know what, Zura, I don't think this is good for you because your focus is on sale And this is in public health. So you don't want to veer off your goals. That's a long stretch. And yes, we can find cell biology in some part of public health, but it's not what you're doing in your lab at the moment. So again, looking at how this may interfere with your personal life. I'm a big advocate for finding work-life balance. And now that I'm in academia, I look at the balance between work, academic, research, and your personal life. If you cannot find a balance, everything is not going to be 50-50. But you see that maybe I can give up working out 2 or 3 days. Maybe I can give up not spending time with my family a day or two. Maybe I can do this. Maybe I can cut this back. But you have to remember, the more people you cut back out of your personal life, the less lonely you will be at the end. And you want to find that balance. And you will only know how to balance that when you have looked at the full proposal and have written down on paper, how much time is it going to cost me to do X, Y, Z, and how much time am I going to have to give up over here? If there's such an imbalance, you may want to reconsider that. Okay, and the second part, deciding what to say. I've said some of these at the beginning, but also know that you don't want to be a crowd pleaser, which is only going to distract you because you don't know the dynamics within the crowd. Some people even may be on this call, may just be here because they had nothing else to do. Maybe some are really interested in listening to what we have to say. Maybe some are just curious to what this network is all about. So be true to yourself and be honest with, this is a topic that I really want to dive into, really want to get to know some more information about, want to research and see how I can contribute to the research community. So it all begins with you. Who are you going to please? You. You may not be able to please your PI. So again, you have to understand the difference between being a crowd pleaser and going forth and pleasing yourself first, and how you're going to please or contribute to the scientific community. If it's not a significant contribution, you may not want to do that. Again, going back to establishing your boundaries. Know where your boundary lines are and never, never cross them. As time moves on or more opportunities come, you may have to adjust your boundaries. As your life changes, you may have to adjust your boundaries. As you get closer to graduating or going for interviews for a faculty position, or whatever the position may be, your boundaries may change. But your boundaries should never change to reflect that you are less than a researcher, a doctor, or whatever the case may be. Always let your boundaries change to reflect how wonderful you are, how good you are at what you do, and how you're matured in certain areas. Never go down, never downplay your abilities, never downplay who you really are. Always be true to yourself, and you do that by saying no. Next slide.
And as we continue to dive deeper in conversation with Zer, she also said that sometimes when I want to be in the right environment, I'm deciding how to change your environment is key, but I can't do it all the time. And she said this because she feels that sometimes that other individuals are like pulling her like a puppet. Mm-hmm. And we talked about it a little bit more, and I was like, well, maybe you have to redesign how you think about your plan of action. And I said, you have to learn to say no, because you have to decide how to be strategic. Sometimes we can't have every opportunity right away. We have to kind of pull back to really put ourselves in the right environment for that year later or that 2 years later. And sometimes we do have to say yes to some things because we need to be strategic. Maybe a talk or a seminar gets us a grant. Maybe a talk or seminar gets us that networking opportunity that we need to know how to get to the next level, or that collaboration that'll give us that Nature Cellular Science paper. But everything must be done with an internal barometer. This is something that Dr. Schuler will discuss. And then also, she will discuss about how to be strategic, because understanding a no now does not mean it can't be a yes later. And she'll uncover for us how these strategies are so effective and why they're important to decide on your environment when you're saying no, and how to be strategic. Dr. Schuler?
Sure. And again, as we continue our conversation with her, as Dr. Hinton has mentioned, she feel like she's being used, and that is not an uncommon feeling. And so in the example we have here, how do you change your environment? My number one question to her is, what is it about the environment you want to change? That's number one. Number two, why is it that you want to change the environment? Is it the change, is it going to make it better, or will it make the environment worse? And then you have to ask, as you're examining the environment, what is it about yourself that says something is wrong with the environment? It could be just your perspective from how you're looking at it. So how do we move forward with this? First, let's deal with ourselves. As you already can see, I always deal with self. Let's check ourselves and see how it is that I'm looking, what lens am I looking at the environment? Number one, what is it about the environment that I don't know that I think I might know? And how do I go about that? You have to talk. You have to communicate with the people that are around you. You have to communicate with the people who are in that environment. Then once you do that, you can bring back those answers and say, you know what? The environment is okay. It was just me. Or it may come out to be that there are some changes that are necessary, but you have to find out the politics that's what's in the environment. Find out why people are doing what they're doing, why they're doing it this way. And then you can only make suggestions at that point, because you don't want the change to be something that is just temporarily, meaning it could be a change for a month, but then it has to go back to where it was for whatever reason, whether it's political, whether it's because of policies within in a setting. But it takes a lot of investigation beginning with you. If you find out that you have the wrong perspective, then you have to go within and find out how can you change yourself. And then that's the change within the environment that is necessary so you can move forward. There are some areas that you're never going to be able to change. And we know this if we're true to ourselves. I can't go outside right now and change the weather. I wished I could, but I can't. So what do? I make the adjustments, I dress accordingly, and I move forward with whatever it is that I must do for today, instead of allowing the environment to change what's on my to-do list. I just adapt and move forward. So that leads into how to be strategic. Again, dealing with self, understanding who you are, understanding that no matter how you're feeling at the moment, you need to be honest with yourself and be honest with your PI, your boss, your supervisor, your mentor, and say, verbally say, hey, I don't know what it is, but I'm feeling overwhelmed right now, and I feel like I'm being taken advantage of. And you believe it or not, because I've had to coach students on how to go to their professors and make that exact same statement. And once they connect with the professor, 9 times out of 10, it's all been a misunderstanding. It's all been something that has to do with the student's perspective, because I have students that'll tell me, well, Dr. Schuler, I've seen you in the hall, but you didn't speak to me and I didn't think you liked me. And I said, where did you get that idea from? I didn't see you. If I saw you, I'm sorry. And I had to learn to stop saying I'm sorry, especially if I didn't see you. I've had students that have been 20 yards away. I've had students to be 300 yards away, and they can see me, but I don't see them. And because I don't speak, they say I don't like them, or they thought I was mad at them. And I go, no, let's look at how this let's replay this. How do you know that I wasn't looking down? I was looking to the side. There are other students walking around, and I dismissed you. And for weeks, they have had this feeling that I didn't like them until we actually have a conversation. So again, having this conversation is one of the part of the strategic plans. Another way is to understand what yes means later. You have to articulate that so the person who's offering the proposal will understand fully that Dr. Shula is not committing to this today, but she's willing to help me out in the future. If I just say yes, but I'm meaning not today and not saying not today, the hearer is saying, she said yes. So make sure your communication is clear. Never be half nothing when you're responding to anyone, because the goal is you want to be true to yourself. You want to serve others with that spirit of excellence. And excellence means that it's being communicated in a clear and concise way where there is no misunderstanding. Now that we're in the world of technology because of COVID, everything is by Zoom, everything is by whatever web access we have. We have to be clear, we have to be conscious of who's reading or hearing what we say. So this put us in a new lens now. We must be clear and concise. Next slide.
As we continue to be clear and concise, we also have to observe that when you feel fear or you feel that you're missing out, sometimes you're really not. You have to realize that you may not actually be missing out on anything. It just seems like you are. Sometimes the hottest fad or the hottest trend is just something that's not as timeless as the black dress. So we have to be aware that everything that seems that is glittering is not gold, and everything that's gold does not glitter. Remember these two things because they're interchangeable, and it's very, very important that we think about this. I also want you guys to think that your hard work that you think you're doing, people don't notice, they do. So stop overloading yourself with more hard work to appear like you're doing more. It will speak for itself. Be patient. Consider if you're the cause of your own worry, because a lot of times you're awfulizing because you're comparing yourself to other people. Remember, the power of saying no is not only saying no peripherally, it's saying no to your central self, is what Dr. Shula was talking about. Be aware how to be concise with your say. Say, no, this is not what I need at this time. No, I'm focused on this goal. You can go on my vision board or my vision journal, and I can come back to it. And really, they should go in your vision journal before they even touch your vision board, where you're observing and visualizing this constantly. Next slide, please. So in this first section, we talked about feeling of missing out, fear of missing out, and feeling of being used. All of these are very important concepts to think about when we're saying yes to something, but it's more important to dive deeper. Please go to the next slide. Interestingly enough, as we go deeper into saying no versus yes and when to say them, we oftentimes feel judged because we may appear a certain way, or we may be a certain gender. I actually interviewed this individual named Adrian Eddington, who was previously at Winston-Salem State and now is a PA student. And what's interesting is, at her time, she was doing really well at Winston-Salem, but a lot of times she would say no to a lot of things. And as I was mentoring her, I was like, why do you keep saying no to everything? She says, well, I'm often judged for being a woman. I'm often judged for being introverted and not saying much. I'm often judged for being a person of color, but I do not let my phenotype propel me into situations that I have to prove myself. So this is why I say judge, because I know that I have this feeling of judgment on myself. So I need to be careful about what I say and how I do things, because it's me that I have to be comfortable with, not the outside world. I thought this was very interesting when I was talking to her. And I thought, well, these are some solutions, because she already knows, but it's good to tell everyone else what the solutions are. We talked about what must always we do to think about logical solutions. Well, we have to know the outcomes before we see them. We also have to be aware of how everyone feels, but we don't have to worry about being judged because it's important to keep our mental health together. And lastly, we have to stop trying to control other individuals' feelings about you, meaning you don't have to worry about them. Next slide, please. And if we stop that, then we'll stop comparing ourselves to other people and we'll stop feeling inadequate. Well, Adrian's sister, Ariel, just finished at Western Carolina University and she's studying the MCAT. And while she's studying the MCAT, she took the time to actually go back to school and get her surgical tech license. So she finished first in her class. You know, I'm proud of all of my mentees. So what's interesting about this is she says, I feel inadequate at times because we're always looking at other people in the US. We're always trying to figure out who's better, who's not, and it discourages me because I feel like I can't advance because I'm worried about other individuals. So I told her, you've got to learn to say no to your own doubts inside of yourself. We must find it essential inside of ourselves to be okay and cheer for others. Meaning if you see someone getting an award that you didn't get, thank you for doing that because now you should be networking with them. The person that the grant agency said may have said no to you, but the person that's going to be there in power, they're not feeling inadequate about themselves. And they see that you may have applied for that award too. And later down the line, when someone told you no, it's going to be a yes later because that individual is going to elevate you and push you up bigger than what they were. So sometimes it's better to wait because something that's coming to you, it's okay if you have to wait on it because patience really truly is a virtue. And you don't have to feel inadequate when you have the power of saying no because you compare yourself to other individuals. You're A-okay yourself. That's why we talk about the vision board. The vision board allows us to see where we can access ourselves at and how we can do better. Be aware that it's okay to pause. Be aware that it's okay to take situation by situation. You do not have to feel pressured to do everything right away. You know, you just have to focus on one thing at a time. And then lastly, stay focused on your IDP plan, on your own vision board. When you are a mid-career faculty member and you're having to juggle so many things because you wear multiple hats, sometimes it's better to delegate. I understand how you feel. So for example, I'm at this seminar now. I'm still in meetings. I'm texting and telling people, okay, I need you to do this and that, but my attention's here. So how do I multitask in this case? I have a team of individuals that work for me, different undergrads on different projects and graduate students. And so what I decided to do is to give them priority for certain things and then move to doing other things. Because it's important that we figure out what is the essential thing that I can do and handle so I can feel like I have some control over the situation. And then the things that I can't handle that can't be for right now, they can handle because I can delegate those things to them. And I wanted to address this because there are some other people that are not like Caitlin that have expertise of juggling multiple things. But I thought it would be very interesting for other people to be aware that there are ways that you can delegate. And you guys keep the comments coming because I'm reading them and I really appreciate your input. And also, if you refer back to your individual development plan for your own personal life, you can make an individual development plan for your laboratory or for your mentoring strategies so that you align with what you need to do for your time for individuals and what time you need to reclaim for yourself. Next slide. So don't always feel inadequate. Don't always feel like you have to be judged because the feeling of being judged and the feeling of being inadequate is all that you have to do is say no to it. You don't have to allow it to take over your life. But when you allow it to take over your life, next slide, it will damage you. And so that is when we get into saying no. As you can see, I love to recruit. As you can see, I love to. But sometimes I realize that we have to be aware of when you're taking on too many responsibilities. I'll give you a personal example of why the power of saying no is so important. I recently accepted a faculty position at Vanderbilt. I'm so excited about it. I've done a lot of DI work, a lot of mentoring, a lot of teaching. I'm doing some DI and mentoring and teaching now. But what I've realized is that you have to pick and choose what you do. So in the end of December, I would give up my academic and career development instructor title because I need to focus of aligning to make sure that my research program is very successful. And I'll switch my efforts to actually hosting my lab meeting 7 months in advance before I land at Vanderbilt. So then my future staff scientists and postdocs already understand the background, the details of what I'm running in my program, and so that they can already start thinking about applying for individual grants. So when we hit the ground and running, I know what preliminary data that they need to be able to be successful in their applications. And so we can also maybe get reviews because I'm a younger professor. All of these things are essential. So sometimes saying no is not a bad idea because it frees you up to do things that you have to focus on for your vision board. And my vision board is being a very prominent, very successful faculty early on who's already going to get tenure in like 4 years. So there's a lot of things that we have to really, really think about. So as we talk about power of saying no, what is it? There's an adverb, not at all, to no extent, meaning you don't have to say anything to anyone. You just say it okay with a nonverbal communication or a verbal communication. And people, you have to learn that a no is a performance. It gives you the ability to stay on task as you were. And lastly, it is a negative answer or a decision, as in voting. So I just wanted to put in there, it's a powerful decision-making that you have the ability to do in your political life. Next slide. So now let's talk about the political decisions of work. Power of saying no is very important because what we did in this next section was interview Dr. Aveline Amato, who's at Cornell, Wiley Cornell, and he runs the diversity office there. He's the director of diversity. And what was interesting was I asked him a couple of questions related to what does it mean to say no. And I also asked Dr. Melanie McReynolds, who we also will be featuring with us on the Trials and Tribulations of Graduate School next time. And they came up with some responses that we'll discuss and talk about. Dr. Aveline Amato said, what does it mean to say no? To say no is to understand your boundaries. It is also represents a self-awareness of your capabilities and workload. Next slide, please. It also means to say no by playing Dr. Melanie McReynolds' recording, and then we'll have a brief conversation. Could you play her recording? So maybe we're having technical difficulties, and that's okay if we are.
Oh, there it is.
Okay, perfect.
Hang on 1 second.
Of course. So as we wait, we can go back to talking about Dr. Avelino's quote. So I find it interesting that you have to be capable of saying no in different ways. I also think it's important to be aware that getting multiple responses from different individuals gives us the power to have access to ours and access to being able to do more. So Dr. Melanie McReynolds says,
I think this will work now.
go right ahead.
Into account.
Excellent.
What does it mean to say no? So saying no to me can mean protecting my peace, right? Not getting taken advantage of, not overextending myself in the moments when I need to prioritize my responsibilities, and finally, knowing when not to extend myself. A lot of times when opportunities come our way, or these moment presents itself, we really do have to take into account, will me saying yes really further what I'm doing, or will me saying no be okay? Or if I say yes, can it harm another beneficial area?
So one thing I like about Dr. Melanie McReynolds is, although she's an Ivy League at Princeton University, you heard what she said. Her peace is most important. So she puts no with a punch, meaning she lets her actions speak for her. So sometimes she says no because she's working in the lab, because her paper that she just submitted to Nature Metabolism is the most important thing and the key to being faculty. She said no to some diversity things because now she's applying for multiple, really, she's applying for one faculty position, but in the country wants her because she said no to a lot of opportunities, and she delegates. We have a group called the Community of Scholars where we write pieces, and you notice that Dr. Melanie McReynolds is on the piece. She's even second author, I believe, on The Power of Saying No, and the one that we'll do the next time we meet, she's a high author on the list as well. But she writes her thoughts based upon her organization on a weekend, and then she brings them to the group and actually leaves those recordings of what she thinks that should be discussion points. And then she goes on to do her task that she needs to do. So sometimes that's why you have to learn how to multitask. You can have multiple hats, but sometimes you have to tell people what percentage effort you'll have for this task. And then from there, you have them develop their ideas more, and then they have the intellectual properties because they participated, and then they'll do the editing over a box. So then they can have their input. So remember, there's different varieties of way that people can interact with you. Next slide.
What does it mean to say?
So another thing about having your piece is reclaiming your time. And Dr. Schuler will tell us why they say no, why people say no, why people talk about the boundaries of what they have and reclaiming your time. And there's a little video of reclaiming your time I think is cute. So
yes, reclaiming your time. As we maneuver through, whether it's through our postdoc or whether we're starting off as new faculty or in midway of being a faculty, trying to go for tenure, we don't realize how much time we have lost in trying to reach certain goals, and especially when the goals that we're trying to reach have those strict timelines, and especially when it comes to tenure and promotion. Some schools have different policies when it comes to tenure and promotion. You have to hit it by this date, have this done by this date, and so forth. And the best way to accomplish this tenure track is to go ahead and set a schedule. Come up with a strategic plan. If you have a family, you want to say, I'm spending so many days a week over here with my family, and then the rest of the time I'm spending in my lab or talking to my students or serving on a committee. And you don't want to you don't want to extend yourself on committees. As we said in the beginning, some committee work is wonderful for you, where there are other committee works are just there and just absorbing your time. So how do you reclaim your time? Go back to what Dr. Hinton has been saying throughout this series here. Have your vision board. Stick to a plan. Come up with a strategic, not only plan, but goals. How do you move strategically? Always stay close to not just one mentor, but have mentors with an S on the end. It is okay to have mentors that are outside your setting. Because if your mentors are all within one lab, guess what? More than likely, you're going to get the same type of advice where someone else outside of the lab can help you to strategically and avoid a lot of the pitfalls. One of the things I enjoy so much is at WSSU is staying connected with the retired faculty members, because just before their retirement, it's like I could tell that something is going on. You're not moving around, or you're not doing a lot of committees. You're not hosting a lot of seminars. What's going on? And each of them have said, it's time for me to pass the mantle. So I'm letting my mentees learn the ropes so I can step back, and I'm preparing to retire. I no longer have to do this all the time. And if I had learned earlier, I wished I know what I know now, and that is I have lost a lot of time with serving myself. And the one thing I believe in reclaiming your time also means reclaiming yourself. You cannot forget about yourself. Next slide.
Great, great. I really like this. You can go to the next slide. It's okay. You can click anywhere on it. So Dr. Amato, we interviewed him about strategic strategies of saying no and why you want to have your strategies of saying no. He gave us some thoughts, and we'll explain what he means in a little bit better detail. And I asked him about why do you say no strategically? I think the older you become, the more strategic a no becomes. Earlier in your career, agreeing to do everything will have you quickly realizing what it means to overcommit. And you can also realize early in your career how hard it is to do something well when you're stretched thin. So by saying yes to everything in the hopes of coming off as dedicated and hardworking, increases likelihood of producing a bunch of mediocre work that may not truly represent your brand. So let's get to Caitlin's question, or Kathleen, excuse me, Kathleen, I can't shorten your name. Kathleen Briggs, Dr. Kathleen Briggs, she says, what if you do, what can you do basically if you don't have people to delegate and you're aware of are you aware of any other strategies to help you if you're multitasking? So I am. One thing is just to start with what Dr. Avelino Amato said. Be strategic with your no's. So actually tell them the things that you're doing, or if you're not the chair of the department, which I'm assuming you're not because you said you're mid-career, but you could be. If so, congratulations. You could actually ask your chair to champion for you so you don't even have to worry about it. You can tell them, say, hey, a lot of people are giving me these opportunities. I would love to say no, but for me, I can't because I'm not in a position to. Is it possible that we could use amplify my voice as a technique? So I forward it to you and ask, can I do the opportunity? And you say no for me because I don't feel comfortable and not strong enough yet to say no by myself. This way you don't have to overcommit and you can take Dr. Avellino's advice. And when you're already stretched really thin and you feel like there's no way out, maybe we need to take a step back and actually go to the next slide. Interestingly enough, we asked Dr. Melanie McReynolds, why is it important to be strategic? And her answer is going to give us a little bit more insight. Can you play her recording?
There's an ideal or a perfect way that we can use our no strategically. When I think of this, I think about if I need to say no, recommending the opportunity for someone else behind me to have that chance, right? It's kind of like shining, you have the ability to shine your light, but if you can't take advantage of that opportunity, allow someone else that exposure. So, yeah.
That is the key. Dr. Melanie McReynolds' technique of practicing shine too, because I'm already shine heavily. So it's important to do sometimes things in groups. You can have the light on you, or you can allow other people's voices to be amplified. And that's what she does so well. She'll get something, she'll say, yeah, send me an email in writing. And then she'll nicely reply and say, I can't do this opportunity. And she'll shop it around to her other colleagues that she feels are at her level or close to it. Next slide. And that's strategic with your no's. And if you are trying to be the nice guy at work or the person that needs to build up favors from other people and seen as an opportunity every time that you do something, or opportunist, maybe you need to look like this mean. And I said, go ahead and issue the stop work order, meaning you got to learn how to laugh a little bit and tell people no. Do not be afraid to tell people this is a great opportunity, but I will revisit this at a later date. How about we think of someone else at this current time that could help you? Dr. Schuler, could you talk about this? I think we talked about this the other night, actually.
Yes, I myself had to learn how to say no. And one of the things have learned through that is, although people, I see where he said nice people at work needs favor. Everyone, whether they're nice or not, needs a favor. However, all favors are not known to be an opportunity. So again, we go back to what we said initially, and that is, what is the cost? What is the consequence? And again, you don't want to give a quick answer to anything. Always like the old Proverbs where it says, be quick to listen and slow to speak. And the only way you can do that is that you have to intentionally listen to what the person is saying and not try to figure out so much of what it is he or she is not saying. Hear exactly what has been said to you, investigate, and see how this can work as an opportunity or how this is not an opportunity. And if you see that it's not, again, use humor with it and says, you know, it's a opportunity, but it's not one that I can give justice to and make you shine. So always put it back on the other person. And if I can't make you shine, I don't want to do this. Your name is too great, and I never ever want to be the person to damage your name. So let's share this with someone else. If it is a great opportunity, be honest again with the individual and let him or her know that, hey, I'm not able to put 100% into this right now. I can give you about 50 or 60% of my time. And if you're okay with that, then let's go for it. You know what? Come to think about it, I haven't given 100% to anything but my research. So are you sure you want me? Again, I don't want to let you down, but if you're good with 60% and you can do the 40, well, then it's a happy marriage. If not, then we're going to have to sign a divorce paper right now. And you move forward. Throw some humor. Throw some humor in there. And that eases a lot of self-doubt in yourself. And it also lets the person know that you are honest. And it may not be this opportunity, but trust me, the individual will remember you in the future when he or she has something that is really and truly something that big for them, and they are looking for people that they can trust. They're looking for people who will give them excellence, and they're looking for individuals who have integrity, because without integrity, your research, nor whatever job you're doing is worth that time lost. Next slide.
And when you have time lost, you have to get it back. So what's interesting is, when do you find it the hardest to say no at work? You're saying yes to other things, but you didn't say yes to what you really need to do. Dr. Avelina Amato has said, it's the hardest to say no when that person asking you for a favor has done so much for you. I found that this to be particularly difficult with my advisors during my PhD. They helped me and created a number of opportunities for me. I felt indebted to them because of everything they did for me. They're the only two people during my PhD education I wouldn't say no to. So here, he has a good strategy. He said, I only say yes to certain people. That's good. But also at the same time, you feel indebted when you say yes to the same two people all the time. Be careful. People get used to you saying yes and never know that you're going to say a no. So they're going to keep pushing the boundary. We have to be strategic from the beginning. Start with saying, this is an interesting opportunity. I'm really excited about it. Give me a week to think about it. Don't be responsible for indebting yourself in a trap full of things that people have done for you and you have to pay it back. It's like debtship, and then people try to take advantage of you. It's hard enough to be free, but when you have weights on your back that are weighing you down and putting you in the ocean, how can you overcome that when you barely know how to swim now? Do not put yourself in a way that you're going to have to do too much to get where you need to be. Assert yourself to realize you are just enough as a minority, as a woman, as an invisible minority. You are just enough. And that's the bottom line. Next slide. What I find interesting about what Dr. Amato said was, I challenged him to tell me a little bit about the hard working times. So he said, I also have a hard time saying no to my family. As a first generation, the first person in my immediate family to have a PhD, I feel it's my responsibility to help uplift them. I support my brothers quite a bit, and what they fail to understand is time management. They wait until the last minute to get things done and then spring it on me for support. I would love to say no, but when receiving my support is difference between them moving forward in my life or not, I drop what I can do. I drop what I'm doing to support them. Dr. Mato and I have talked about this many a times. This is good and bad. It's good to be there for family, but it's also good to be there for yourself. Because if you're not healthy, you can't help your family. You have to realize that you have to be indebted to yourself first. Get yourself out of debt so you know when to say yes and when to say no. Then you can start evaluating the things around you. Be the center of the cell, the nucleus. Know what's going out of the cell and exporting, what's coming to the cell and importing. Be aware of what the transcriptional machinery is telling you to do. You have to program it, not the other way around. Because if you continue to let the DNA only do transcription, then you're in control of it. But when you do the epigenetic modifications that are coming from outside of the environment, you're not in control anymore. Be careful about what you say yes to and what you say no to, because every opportunity must be vetted and weighed. Next slide. But when you do this, you can be aware of saying no and how it can impact your work. Time management issues will be less, and you'll have more resources to yourself because you're able to say no and pick and choose the right opportunity that will yield more resources for you to do your work in lab or advance yourself in your career. And also, just maybe you might have an addiction to saying yes because you don't feel the understanding of how to have self-awareness in yourself. And that means you should go back to the original seminar that we talked about having more than one mentor to get guidance and mentorship to be available to being able to do these things. And Dr. Schuler, could you tell them about why we must stop thinking about work sometimes and how we can manage ourselves to have better time and more resources if we actually learn how to say no to the right things?
Sure, and just like we're in this session now, and I'm glad that you all are staying on even at the hour mark. But when we say no, and we use our time management to help say no, then we can stop then and have some real reasonable, doable action items that are set aside for a specific time. Time management is another key factor that we practice highly at WSSU. So we have to start off by understanding what time this task require. How much time does this task require? And then compare it to how much time each day I have to work towards it. If I don't see enough time in my schedule on a certain day, I'm going to say no, or I'm going to assign it to one of my colleagues. Then that's another resource. Your colleagues are a resource. Your mentees, they're a resource. Mentors are a resource. And then rest is also a resource, because when we are in rest, when we have that balance, then we can come up with more ideas. We have creative thought. It's just like we get a new zen of energy and we step back and not look at work for a moment, especially me. When I step back from work and shut down everything from work and enjoy my day for me or with my family members, it's always during those times when I'm enjoying life that an answer comes or a resolve to an issue may pop up. So it's good to reconnect with just life itself and not work all the time, because guess what? Work is going to be there tomorrow. You don't know when a family member may leave you at this earth. So you want to find that balance, and for goodness sake, I'm not wishing death on anyone, but we have to come and be realist when we live in this world. So other resources, we are in the internet stage now. Google, there are so many blogs, there are so many YouTube videos out there that have great ideas. Be resourceful. learn how to be resourceful, learn how to take responsibility for your life and for your work and for your family. You will not have all the answers, so seek answers. Your mentor, if you have a good mentor, a group of mentors, or a great network, that those are all resources. Mentorships, always a good mentor it is priceless. While you're in a lab, while you're going through promotion and tenure, and after you leave the lab, and after you have uh, been awarded promotion and tenure, you always want to keep a mentor. And so when you put time management issues, when you put your resources together, then life becomes an addiction. It's an addiction to always trying to find balance so you can take time away from work and enjoy life and not and focus on work. You should never leave work so you can walk away and say, well, I'm not gonna work on this right now. I'm just gonna go and take a drive and think about it. That's not leaving work.
Correct.
Leaving work means, or saying no to work means, I'm leaving work and I'm going to focus on whether it's shopping, whether it's traveling, whether it's reading a good book, having a nice glass of wine, preparing a meal for a family or a neighbor. My focus is going to be elsewhere. So again, you yourself is a good resource. So let's go to the next slide.
So Dr. Melanie Moreno had her own thoughts, and Dr. Melanie Moreno is just absolutely unique. And so she posed this question about, it's different for minorities to say no. I didn't even think about that. So she starts the series for this question off about how do you say no as a minority? So can you play her response?
From my experience, personally, it's hard for me to say no a lot of times because for so many years or so many times I was always looked. Maybe it was because of who I was or where I'm from. Maybe no one really believed that I could do the tasks that needed to be done. So when opportunities came my way, per se, to speak about my science, to sit on these committees, if it was because I was a Black woman or not, I was just happy for that opportunity to finally show people who I was, what I was about. And I also understood the importance of being at the table. So maybe we could look at it as minorities we feel like we can't say no because we need to say yes to make sure that the person behind us can make it, to make sure we are looking out for our best interests if we can get to this table. And sometimes we're just proving to people that we deserve to be in that space. So I like to let the work I do speak for me. So if I can juggle it all and say yes and be that person, I can lead you. I don't know. That's my take on it. And it could be the take of a lot of other people. But it is important to protect your peace and say no when you absolutely cannot do it.
Wow. I really like her thoughts because they were so powerful. And it allowed me to realize a lot about maybe why I take on so many opportunities. This is why we have to have self reflection to help each other realize that you have to be aware about what you're doing. So when we're saying no, maybe it's good to have a variety of individuals that you hang out with. It's not only good to say no to what type of people you hang out with, but it's good to say yes to saying a variety of individuals is what's important. I can't lose sight of just hanging out with one type of people because I don't understand another type. Maybe they give you a better perspective on why they say no more so than what you do. And it's essential that you say no, because if you don't say a no as a minority, you'll think that it's your obligation, that you have to take on the world, that you have to straddle everything to just be who you are. And remember, the power of saying no is a powerful thing to have and not waste. And I want you to know that every opportunity is not a good opportunity because sometimes it's other people trying to showcase you instead of you showcasing yourself as who you can be. Next slide. And when we talked about this with Dr.
From my experience,
When we talked about this with Dr. Avellino, he had said, the short answer is yes. But this question ultimately comes down to the environment you're in. I never found it hard to say no professionally because I'm aware of what my own goals are. So this key statement here, his environment is essential. That's why he can say no. And remember, he's at an Ivy League and he's telling people no. And he's in a position to say no, not because he's in a role that is a director, but because he knows his environment and he knows himself. It's a multifaceted environment he's talking about. He knows himself as an individual and he knows what's around him that he needs to manage. Dr. Schuler, could you talk about this and just sum up this section before we transition to the last couple of slides?
Sure. So as we see again, it comes down to your environment, knowing the environment. And before you respond, that's key. Understand the environment. In the HR world, we have this policy that's called good fit. What's a good fit? Are you the good fit? And sometimes we get it right and sometimes we don't. So the environment plays a significant role on how to say no, when to say no, and when to say yes, and when not to say yes. How do we know what environment we're in? Again, you have to be strategic in learning the people, learning the policy, learning the politics, and learning exactly what your role is in this environment. Do not go outside your role. Do not try to shine so that you are trying to outshine your PI or your mentor or a certain professor. Always, the old saying, stay in your lane. If the environment is one that you're not that comfortable in, then I will also recommend that you find another location, because it's nothing like being caught into an environment where you feel like you have to say yes, 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 and you're so afraid to say no, knowing that you're not capable of doing something. So you never want to be in a position or in an environment that keeps you locked into these harmful emotions, because eventually it will show in your work. So if you can't have an open dialogue with the PI in the environment, then you may have to go outside that particular area, but staying within the boundaries of a department. And you, for example, if it's with the professor, you go to the department chair. If you can't get anywhere with the chair, then you follow the next strategic goal, and that is to go to your dean or to your provost, and hopefully it can be resolved at the chair's level. And then on a professional level, again, I'm just like Armando. I have no problem as a professional to say no. Why? Because when I'm asking for favors, I'm asking for not just a favor, but I want quality work. And I don't want you to feel obligated because I'm Dr. Schuler and because I wrote you a great letter of recommendation, you feel obligated. I never want that. I'd rather have your honesty than to pretend or feel like you're obligated. I don't want obligation. I want you to freely be able to do what it is I'm asking you to do. So therefore, as a professional, I give the same courtesy. I have no problem with saying no. It's just the way you go about saying no. Next slide.
And when you do this, you'll be able to confront with the challenges of not volunteering yourself just past, or to compromise yourself professionally just to feel supported in an environment that you're already not supported in. Don't feel that you have to catch up by saying yes. Catch up by saying no to a lot of particular things that may be difficult, but you got to do it. Next slide. As we continue to close, next slide. As we continue to close, we want to end it here so that we have time for questions. We have a little bit of extra slides that we'll share because we'll stay on the line and they'll be used to actually help with some of the questions probably because we anticipated this. But we just wanted to end and give a little specific set of things for minorities to have a little bit more background for when they're having to say no. Minorities, do not feel that you have less power to say no. Remember that sacrifice is not always the answer. Tokenism is not always the answer. Stereotype, threat, and unconscious biases are not the answer. Implicit bias and willful ignorance is not the answer. It's simply no. It has to be no. Because when you say yes to everything and try to take on the world and try to be the perfect minority, you end up actually contributing to these things that are commonly thought of as already the golden standard for what minorities will do and say. You have to break down stereotypes by being an individual. So your power lies in saying yes and no. And remember, the power of saying no is something that we must do through now what opportunities right for our CV, to listening to the verbal cues of what they're saying and the nonverbal cues of what they're not trying to say. And then acknowledging an observation that must stay true to who you are. Acknowledging the information at hand and realizing the magnitude of the opportunity. And identifying what issues and expectations that this no or this yes may have to it. And being aware that you have to give much thought to everything that you say. And lastly, always be open to connecting someone else to an opportunity when you think it's not the right time for yourself to say yes to. It's okay to say no, but it's not okay to say yes to everything. So as we close, we would love to open it up for questions. And if you have questions, we'll fill those now and use the last slides to take you on an adventure with answering them. Does anyone have any questions?
I thought I saw one. Let me see.
So there was a question asked earlier from Dr. Kathleen Briggs that you already answered, but I think it might be good to answer it again and just kind of go through it. So it is, what do you do, or what if you do not have people to delegate to? Are you aware of other strategies that you can use in order to kind of facilitate the needs of all the people asking you for things?
Yes, next slide, please. Next slide. We're going to skip a couple of Dr. Amato's great nuggets. We're going to get to answering it in a different way. Listening to the signs. Your EQ matters. So I was giving you kind of a summary of what's in the power of saying no. So when you go to the back of the article, there are a list of strategies that say the delivery of no is also critical skill required to maintaining professional relationships. And so these 8 strategies give you an idea of how to say no when you don't know how to say no to yourself. And if you do this checklist of these 8 strategies, next slide, I'll let others look at them while we speak. You have to be aware of each thing. The first slide captured what's going to increase your CV, all the different talks, all these different, lectureships, winning awards, but also you have to listen to the verbal and non-communication of what people are saying. And now it's not in person, it's over Zoom. So we have to be careful about what we're giving to others, as we have to also acknowledge and give information to ourselves and listen to our own nonverbal cues about, are we mentally healthy to be able to take on more things? So always assess your mental health status before you try to dive into something that is going to be a new task, a new adventure. Next slide. And then also be aware that your research is the primary goal, and your family and your personal time is the primary goal. And then also being aware to hang out with your friends in the bottom right corner, or giving a talk to a diverse background of individuals is more exciting. And while you do this, don't think about saying yes to everything, because it's going to propel you to stress and more anxiety. So be aware to find a peer support group or advice from someone that's an elder, such as a mentor, that's going to give you the power to say no. And when you can't do it yourself, identify any issues with expectations and express compassion in saying no by finding someone that can amplify your voice, such as the chair of the department, such as your mentor. Next slide. And then lastly, be aware that it's good to say no, because you want to have fun. You don't always want to just be stuck with doing things because you think you're being, highlighted and being creative and the best. Give it a thought and find an alternative or definitive no and justify it later. You don't have to say it the right way, or, you know, you can say, I'm going to do this. And because of this opportunity, I think it will be better for this individual, like we talked about with number 8. And next slide. Remember, it is important to say no. And it's not good to say yes all the time. Identify your boundaries and stick to them. And boundaries are the key to knowing how to say yes and how to say no. You have to have refusal skills. And that means strategies of what you know best that's going to keep you the healthiest. Dr. Schuler, do you have any thoughts about this?
Yeah, I think what the person is also asking for help as to, or resources for helping her when she doesn't have the I guess, the bandwidth or the people resources to say no to, or to delegate tasks to. This is where I say reach out and start a little trainee group. You become a mentor and train students on what it is that you do, whether it's in your lab or whether it's in your classroom. We have work study students on our campus that I train. We have federal work study students. We have temporary work study students. So, and I train them. So it would free up my schedule. So those are resources. Students are great resources. If you're working with a grant, you may be able to pay them out of the grant, or go to your department chair and check and see if there are other resources where a student could be paid if you train the student to do X, Y, Z. Then also check with your university to see if you have any type of agreement with surrounding universities or community colleges, and see if you can bring in those students at a hospital, residents at a hospital. So go outside the box if your program allows you to do that. I hope that helps.
And we talked about refusal skills. Next slide. Next slide. Saying no can be difficult. So remember, do not feel like you're on a race to say no and say yes to everything else but trying to say no. Organize your thoughts. If you have time management, invited speaker talks, mentoring committees, grants, demands for PI or boss, research or teaching, simply say, I need to look at my calendar. That is the simplest way to actually say no. And if you find it hard saying no to yourself, then maybe you should say no to someone else so that you learn to say no. Maybe you need to practice it. You maybe not want to hurt someone, but maybe if you don't hurt that individual's feelings in the context of saying no, you'll hurt yourself and then you won't be able to help anyone else. And if you take away time from what your personal life is like, you won't be able to balance it and you won't be able to say no to your boss when you need it most. Saying no to someone of authority, you don't have to do that, but you have to find ways to have other people help you with that. And feel free to think of some things as a loss, because sometimes you just need to miss out, because it's better to have your mental health intact. So don't look like this picture at the right, where you're running and saying yes to everything, but realizing you need to say no to something. Any other questions?
Yeah, we actually have a question come in the Q&A. It is, to stay focused, you will likely say no more often than you say yes. How do you ensure that you don't develop a reputation that you are one who says no to things and perhaps be perceived as being too self-focused?
Ooh, good.
Say that last part again, Katie.
How do you ensure that you don't develop a reputation that you are the one who says no to things and perhaps be perceived as being too self-focused?
Dr. Schuler? Yeah.
Yes, I'd be happy to answer that. So once you go back to yourself, and I know the question is being too self-focused, you yourself would be able to determine that. So you keep a log or keep a book on to say, I said no to Dr. Hinton last month. Now I'm saying no to Dr. Schuler this month. Then I'm saying no to Dr. XYZ the next month. And I'm saying no, and you can go down the months. And you look at your work. If your work is not up to par and you're saying no to all these people, then yes, you're going to come off with that. But when you say no with an explanation as to why you're saying no, I think that takes you out of that bucket that you're speaking of. It's just not saying, okay, no, I can't do that. It's saying, no, I'm sorry, but I don't have the bandwidth to carry out that task right now. However, if you can wait about another 2 months, I'll be more than happy to give you some time. It's the way that you approach saying no. And again, if you're saying no, 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 you need to look at why you're saying no, because that's going to determine why you're in that bucket. Again, we cannot worry about perceptions. The first thing is to worry about how you perceive you, where your PI is how he or she perceives you, or your mentor or your chair, whoever it is that's over you, because you always have someone over you if you're working in an entity. So you want to find that balance and get strong feedback from your mentor, from your chair, from your dean, from your collaborators. If they're saying, okay, Dr. Schuler, you're not going outside the research. We need you to do X, Y, Z. Then at that point, then I'm going to respond and say, help me to do that. How do I balance what's happening here in the lab and serving on this committee? Because this committee may meet twice a week and I don't have 2 or 3 hours out the week to give to the committee. So help me to balance. And trust me, they will give you solutions. But again, to answer that question, you yourself keep a log on to how often you're saying no, and ask the question, am I explaining why I am saying no? And then number 3, should I say yes when I said no without thinking about it? So never, never give an answer until you weighed out the consequences. Don't be so quick to give an answer, but be honest with your consequences. And always, always, always get feedback from your mentor, from your chair, from your PI, from someone else. Always get feedback. I hope that answer helps.
They confirmed that it did. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, everybody, we are at our very last minute. If there are any other questions, please put them in now. Otherwise, I have posted the links to the Interim in Career Development webinar page where this will be posted, as well as the Interim in YouTube channel, also where this will be posted. I've also posted in the registration link for the next in this webinar series, the Trials and Tribulations of Graduate School. You will need to register in advance for that. If there are no other questions, Doctors Hinton and Schuler, thank you so much for taking the time today to present this wonderful webinar on the power of saying no for the Interim in Career Development webinar. If anybody has any questions, we can definitely add those in. Otherwise, thank you so much for your time, and we look forward to the next installment in this series.
Okay, Katie, do you need us to stay online?
No, that's it. Thank you so much.
Okay. All right. Thank you for the invite.
Thank you so much. We'll see everyone soon.
And thank you, everyone. I hope you have a great weekend.
Yes.
And just remember, just say no.
Wonderful. Thank you. All right. Everyone have a wonderful day. We'll talk to you later.
Okay.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.